This video discusses suicide and mental health challenges. If this content raises concerns for you, contact Lifeline on 13 11 14 or visit lifeline.org.au. For immediate support, call 000. My name's Tony Johannsen. I'm a psychotherapist. In this conversation, I'm sitting down with Tim Rogers, Joe Williams and Matt Purcell. Three men with very different stories.
That one event really changed so much of my next 10 years of my life.
To know that I can find that peace, without getting plonkered is a relief.
If things went a different direction on that day, then I wouldn't be sitting here. But I always say something bigger than me kept me here.
Each of them has faced themselves and worked out how to manage their own mental health. This isn't about fixing anyone, it's about listening, learning, and maybe seeing a bit of ourselves in their stories.
Nice to meet you boys. My name's Matt. I'm in business, so I have a whole bunch of businesses, mostly in brand and marketing.
Gentlemen, my name's Tim Rogers. I am mostly a musician. About 78% of me is a musician.
I'm Joe Williams, Wiradjuri and Walgaloo man. Played in the NRL for a number of years and now as a professional boxer.
Everyone's path with mental health is different, and quite often hearing someone else's turning point can spark motivation for change in other people. What was that moment for you, Matt?
It was a moment where I felt absolutely numb. I just didn't feel happiness or the full extent of how I used to feel. And that's when something I felt like was just slightly broken inside my emotions, and that's not normal for me, so that freaked me out.
What about you, Tim? What was that moment where something's got to change?
It seemed like about 19,022 moments, and the last one, I, on a whim, went to see a GP, and I said, I think I'm cooked. And he just looked me straight and said, you're beyond cooked, you're on fire. And so then I felt at liberty to actually throw myself into hospital and go, well, this is beyond me, I kind of give up.
Joe, what was that moment for you?
I think that realisation where I just put my hands up and realised that I was sick and tired of being sick and tired and needed to do something about it.
So can we go back earlier as to what life was like, managing mental health, living with mental health, before you had the language to describe it or even understand it? Matt, what was that like for you?
When I was old enough to understand, I looked at my mum and dad and thought something's really different, because I'm Korean, but my parents are like Anglo-Saxon, so they look nothing like me. So I thought I was kidnapped. I thought something was really wrong. And they told me I was adopted, and that didn't bother me until I was 6, because that's when they separated, and that's when my whole life fell apart. Went to a new school and I was severely bullied for my race. They threw me in whiz bins. These kids would gang up on me, these several year 6 kids, for weeks, and I would do everything I can to hide what happened to not stress my mum out. So I'd wash my own clothes and try and hide it all. And from the outside, some people might have said, oh, Matt's pretty responsible, but it was just survival. I then thought about my adoption and blamed my adoption. Just asked so many questions like, why am I Korean, and why are they picking me because I look different? And I was just very bitter and hurt. In that way, I just got really angry toward people as a kid. No one thinks about identity as much as an adoptee, in my view. I thought so much about, how do I prove my worth? And maybe I need to earn my worth. Maybe I need to achieve my worth through this and that.
That's an early start as far as the challenge of managing your mental health. Thanks for sharing that with us, Matt.
Yeah, no worries.
What about you, Tim? Like, how far back does this mental health journey go for you?
Well, the big one, the sort of big bang for me was when I was about 16 and started getting anxiety attacks, and just when nervousness slips over into anxiety and the world kind of shifts and everything is perilous. I don't know how they came. Maybe it was moved around when I was a kid, maybe it was medication I was on for skin conditions, I'm not sure. But they happened and they were terrifying, and it probably got misdiagnosed, but it's always just been there since I was there. Then I joined a rock band, and a couple of years later suddenly we were on the road and touring and things were happening. I found that the best way to deal with the anxiety attacks was drugging and drinking. Definitely drinking, because it was immediate relief. And so I used to carry a whiskey bottle on me in a hip flask all the time and think, well, this is a temporary way of dealing with it, and it means I can finish the show if I can just get some plonk in me and quieten that down. Started drinking for about the next 35 years. 4 months ago when I was lying in a hospital bed, and it was like, well, where's this all come to? You're broke, you've actually got nothing in your account, you're adrift from everybody and everything, and now you may not actually be able to perform again because you're unreliable, you'll never get hired again. And recognising that there were thousands and thousands of times where it was that point.
Yeah.
I've kept off the drop for 4 months. You know, it's a 5 minute by 5 minute proposition.
Joe, what about you? What was your relationship like with mental health before you had the language to describe it?
I was involved in rugby league for a long time, played in the NRL. Tough sport.
Yeah.
It's, you know, plus the lifestyle that it comes with, you know, partying afterwards, profile, add it all in together. So on the outside, this exterior person is someone who's confident, someone who's brash. Then you go inside and you look at yourself in the mirror and you hate the person looking back at you because it's a fragile little boy that doesn't really know who he is.
Yeah.
It's a real tussle.
So what kind of behaviours were you engaging in to try and manage that pressure?
When the noise was sky high inside my head, the only thing that I could do to silence it was use as much alcohol and drugs as I possibly could to run away from it.
Yeah.
I realised there was one common thing in all the challenges that I was having in my life, you know, whether it be arguments at home with my relationship, poor form on the footy field, physical fights on the weekends when I was going out. The one thing that was in common with all of it was alcohol and drugs. And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who we used to party a bit, and I said, mate, where have you been? What are you doing? He goes, I just don't go out anymore, Joe, I don't drink. And I was like, what do you mean? But everything he said in that, I wanted that. On the Monday, I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous and started the journey of sobriety. And you know, those early months were a really tough period. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
Yeah, okay.
That diagnosis and learning about bipolar, it actually made a hell of a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I was using alcohol and drugs to minimise what was going on inside my head, and when I got sober, the conversation that was always there saying, Joe, that you're worthless, Joe, that you shouldn't be here anymore, Joe, that everyone else is better off without you. You know, that conversation just gets loud, and it gets to a point where it's screaming. It took me to being on my knees to realise, no, I've got a bigger purpose. You know, it's been 19 years without any alcohol. Whilst I'm not out of the woods, I still have the noise, you know, it doesn't go away. I have better tools now to be able to manage what's going on inside here.
Tim, what's masculinity mean to you?
Not a hell of a lot, if I'm to be honest. That the machismo doesn't impress me much. The attributes that people think about masculinity, about reliability, about strength, I just see that in humanity and not necessarily from another male.
What are your thoughts, Matt?
I modelled masculinity off what I call millennial masculinity. But I think the millennial masculinity to me taught me really bad advice. And that bad advice was, when bad things happen, you'll be right, mate. You'll be fine. Just push through. Get over it. Your heart's broken, just get over it. You lost your job, you'll be fine. And hearing it as a young adult and to being an older adult now, and if anyone says that to me and I'm going through something legitimately hard, I think in myself, how the hell is that going to be all right? Like, that, it does nothing to acknowledge the problem or honour the problem. So what it made me feel is I had to fake it to make it, rather than face it to make it. I think you're more of a man to face it than to fake it in your problems.
It's almost like we're being forced to be hard and to be strong and to be stoic, to be something we're not. And if I'm honest, that tough exterior is some of the biggest challenges that we see in mental health today. I think what a strong man looks like is someone who can be vulnerable.
You know, the experience of being bullied doesn't just disappear when you stop being young. You know, that affects the way you move through the world for a long, long time. Matt, you'd spoken about how they impacted your mental health quite profoundly, those experiences of bullying and racism. Could you say a bit more about that? I think it's a really helpful conversation to have.
Oh, I mean, it hurts talking about it sometimes, being so young. It's one of the youngest memories I ever had, being bullied when I was 6. That one event really changed so much of my next 10 years of my life. Made me feel like a literal piece of rubbish. I didn't feel like I was treated like a human.
Yeah.
So it made me feel very self-conscious of how I looked, how I talked, how tall I was and all that. And there was nothing physically stopping me from going for opportunities or speaking to people. It was a self-worth issue.
Yeah. What do you do in those moments when those intrusive thoughts become quite pronounced? How do you manage them?
I think the pivotal moment for me was having a therapy session, and the therapist really taught me something that I'd never forgotten to this day. They put like 2 chairs, empty chairs in front of me, and they said to me, Matt, that one in that chair is a bully and hates your guts. That one there is your mother. And there may be another chair over here, and that is someone who is the greatest conceivable being you could ever think of. What does that bully have to say about you? And I just list all the things like, you're ugly, you're short, you're dumb, you're not worthy of love, blah, blah, blah. It's like, great, thank you for that. What's your mum say about those same things? You're handsome, you're smart, you're capable. And then they'd say, in that other chair, what would the greatest conceivable being you can think of say about you? Would they say it's true at all? It's like, nah, the bully's wrong. And there's a 4th chair here, Matt, and you're sitting in it.
Yeah.
Who's right or wrong? And that changed my life. To this very day, I use this in CBT therapy as part of that. And because I didn't realize that I had a seat, I didn't feel like I had a voice or a vote. I was looking toward the least respectable person and taking their voice as the main one as my whole identity.
Yeah.
So the whole thing of judgment became a very big thing to me. I believe that I'm a judge. But the question for me is, am I a fair one?
It's actually your own opinion.
Yeah,
of yourself. Yeah. But that doesn't occur to us until someone points it out at times.
Yeah, it's powerful. It's changed my life.
So with your experiences of racism growing up, Joe, you've spoken a bit how you've come to understand that differently, racism and bullying. What is it about that kind of behaviour now that you think motivates people to engage that way?
I was at the hands of some fairly heavy racism as a young bloke, and then I acted out and started throwing my hands as well. And I got suspended from school, and I went home to the old man. My dad said, "What happened today at school?" I said, "I got suspended." He said, "Why?" I said, "Because I was called the colour black."
Yeah.
You know, and he said, "I want to ask you a question. What colour are you?" And I looked at it and I was like, "Well, I am black." And he said, "So you belted a kid for telling the truth?" He said, "You'll never ever beat racism with your fists. You'll only beat racism with the truth and with facts." And from that day, I just started to see things differently, and I started to then learn about the facts, the truth of our history, the real deep understanding of how everything came to be here in Australia. I started to then hit people with the truth. It all of a sudden reshapes how they feel and reshapes how I feel. There's a good saying that hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
You know, also heal people can heal people too. You know, so I learned to have a look at bullies in a very different lens, because bullies are coming from places of needing to feel powerful. And when they need to feel powerful, it's a sure sign that somewhere along in their life, they didn't feel powerful enough. We need to try and help people feel accepted, seen and validated, because all of our behaviours are coming from places of insecurities and hurt and pain.
Yeah. I'd like to zero in on the experience of anxiety, and not sort of like the textbook clinical version, but just your own experience of discomfort or intrusive thoughts, and how it is that you manage those, how they show up, those thoughts.
without doubt, every single time I get on a flight, and I'm talking hundreds of flights a year, these overbearing thoughts that I'm not going to make it to the end. And everything screams at me that the plane's going to go down, it's going to be hijacked, it's the pilot doesn't know what he's doing, what am I kids going to do without me? And like, it's these thoughts that just get so overbearing and so loud and so constant.
What do you do in the moment to manage those thoughts when they arrive?
Do what I'm doing right now. You know, I raised my toes to the top of my shoes. And I flutter my toes back and forth, and I rub my fingers together, and when I rub my fingers together I can feel the heat, and I can rub them a little bit harder, and I can feel each indent of the fingerprints going over each other. That in essence brings me back to center.
Yeah.
It brings me back to presence. Nobody knows that I'm actually a mess inside. I'm doing these little things that are just keeping me back to presence. And it works.
Totally.
And it's worked too many times to not believe it.
You know, I work in mental health, and a lot of men are searching for the fix, and it's not a fix, it's a management.
Yeah.
And it's quite often it's a moment by moment management. Can we talk to you, Tim, a little bit about your relationship with anxiety and intrusive thoughts and how you manage those?
And also talking about what is an anxiety attack and what's just nervousness.
Yeah. How do you understand the difference now?
Because being nervous is okay, just like being melancholy is absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Because I get stage fright intermittently. Sometimes it doesn't happen, sometimes it does. But what can I do to not let that spill over into an anxiety attack? And what Joe was talking about before about being present, I'm really late to it. What can I smell? What can I feel?
Yeah.
What can I taste? What can I touch? And so if you get the stage fright, that's just stage fright. And when it happens, you go, hello, old friend, here you are. You're going to give me energy to get through the next hour and a half or 2 hours. And so recognise that for what it is. If it's an anxiety attack, I'm going to ride it out, but I'm going to do everything I can to not let it get the next level. If it's a stage 1 out of 10, 2 out of 10, 3 out of 10, 4 out of 10 attack, that's okay. You've been through thousands of them before. But just do everything you can for it not to be a 10.
And it's again that moment-to-moment management that we've all been talking about.
Just lessening the chance that it's going to set fire and take off is not a bad start. And I think that's managing it rather than fixing.
Tim, you don't get social anxiety as much as you used to now. How is it that you manage that?
Have a little mantra in a social situation or a social work situation. We say, let's go in at 62%, which means that if you come in all with that nervous energy, wanting to be everything to everybody, you're doomed to fail. So if you come in at 63%, which really is a way of telling yourself, why don't you go in and listen for a bit and read the room, all these other cliches. This says the guy with the silk scarf and the buffon, the three-piece suit. Right, yeah, going at 62%, Rogers. But anyway, this is 62%.
I was going to say, that probably is 62.
I'd love to see 100. Wouldn't you?
It's pretty ghastly. It's and you also, because then you've got somewhere to go.
Yeah.
And also recognising this isn't a performance. You're going into to feel part of a community.
Throughout this conversation, we're hearing that anxiety just doesn't always show up as a panic attack in its most acute form. It can be low-level anxiety that motivates us to succeed, or that
nervousness.
Nervousness, right? Yeah, that there's a normalness to anxiety, and that sometimes our desperation to control the external world is a sign of our anxiety. I think it's so helpful to have these normalising conversations about it. That if you notice yourself trying to control the outside world, maybe that's something to do with your inside world. And maybe it's not a panic attack, maybe it's nervousness. And there's always an opportunity to intervene as well, right?
Tim said an important thing there, like that's also okay.
Yeah.
So there's a normalised feelings in a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, it's part of the human condition.
Damn it.
We live in a culture that equates drinking with fundamentally any of life's moments, whether it's celebrations or commiserations. So I want to talk about getting sober in a culture like that and what it takes to maintain sobriety. What are your thoughts, Joe, when you hear me say that?
Thoughts or experiences? 19 years into my sobriety, which has been a journey. Getting sober meant so much to me that I walked away from a few things and a few people. I walked into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and for me it was a fairly special person in that moment. He said, "Joe, I don't care what you do, who you are, if you're a doctor, lawyer," he said, "you're a father, you're a partner, no matter who you are, you're going to be better at it without alcohol." And for me, I wanted that. 19 years ago now, man. Yeah. It's a long way down the path, but it's still a constant journey now that, you know, people come up to me, "Oh, Joe, do you want to drink?" And I'm like, "No, I don't drink." And they're like, "Well, just have one." I'm like, "No, well, if I have one, there's every chance I'll be home 3 days later." You know, 19 years down the path, there is every chance I might be able to manage it now. Yeah. But I don't want to risk it because my life has improved beyond imagination. So for me, I advocate for anyone who wants to do their best to get on that path, because life gets better and you get better at it when you're sober.
What rang out for me was that it's also profoundly changed your relationship with yourself.
Oh, the one thing that walking away from a life of alcohol gave me access to in the entire world, it gave me access to myself. Mm. When I ran away from who I was, at the core of who I was for so long.
I'm going to jump to you, Tim. Your journey's a bit more recent.
Yeah, it's so new to me that I feel like a little duckling emerging from a shell. A counsellor that I spoke to said, "Thank Flip Wilson, Rogers, you've got hobbies. You know, you're interested in things," because the big problem for most of his clients was boredom. And well, I've got hobbies. I mean, my favourite hobby that I can talk about is reading literature. And suddenly, I'm half an hour later, I feel better. Even at this very early stage, I'm more available to people. It was a source of a lot of panic that if my daughter, who lives in New York, was in trouble, and she called me and I was on the lash, then I couldn't be of any help to her if I just wasn't available. Drinking, while I do it for peace, it just creates drama.
Yeah. And
the bads outweighed the goods.
The longest time that you ever need to be sober is 24 hours. So I might have a drink tomorrow.
It's a long day.
I might have a drink tomorrow, right? But I just know that I won't have one today.
Yeah.
Right, and then I'll start again tomorrow. I say 24 hours like it's an easy thing, when literally it's minute by minute at times.
Yeah. And you know, not everyone uses drinking to try and find calm. For you, Matt, it was actually manic activity. It was working as hard as you could to numb feelings, to be less vulnerable or exposed to the world.
Yeah, there should be a Workaholic Anonymous.
Yeah.
When you're a workaholic, you get rewarded and pat on the back for it, especially when you start doing well. But it makes you feel guilty and shameful if you're not working. It's just not a good thing. But I don't think that gets talked about enough.
Yeah.
We get the people who have struggled with alcoholism or with drugs, that there's things for that, but work, we give them medals.
But the damage can be similar, you know. And for you, as you've said, it's the emotional numbing, and it's not just, "Oh, this is great, I'll get to numb anxiety." You know, by your own account, and definitely by my experience as a therapist, you end up numbing everything. You don't get to pick and choose which feelings you would like and which feelings you don't. It's sort of, they're all on or they're all off, you know. And when you use these techniques, whether it's alcohol or whether it's throwing yourself into your work, in order to achieve numbing, what you realise is that you're struggling to show up and be present for yourself, for your relationships, and that can get really dark really quickly. And the journey's different for everyone, but once you're at that point, that darkness can be hard to get out of. I don't think we can have a conversation about men's mental health in Australia without talking about suicide. I think it would be remiss of us. And I know, Joe, that you've had an attempt on your life. Do you mind just telling us what was going on for you during that period of your life and what that was like in that moment?
Yeah, lots of stuff. I think it was a culmination of many things at the time that I've lived with a very negative, challenging conversation inside my head a long part of my life. And I think over a number of years of trying to silence that with alcohol and drugs and then getting sober, the noise gets sky high, you learn to manage it again, and the ups and downs of being diagnosed with bipolar disorder, marriage, separation, kids, repartnered, separation again, it culminates to the point of sitting on the shower floor, flipping a coin. And I could have flipped the coin 1,000 times and landed on no. It only had to land yes once to be convinced. And it was, you know, people say, why didn't you think of your kids, you know? In those moments, you can't think of anything else. I didn't want to die, I just didn't know how to end the pain. You know, I started to look into, you know, different forms of therapy and what that was, you know, understanding how I got to that point, doing the work to not let me get back to that point, but also having enough humility to say that it's only that far away.
Yeah. Sometimes you've got to go see a professional, and whether it's a GP or whether it's a therapist or whatever it is, right? And actually talk these thoughts out, and the sting can get taken right out of them.
I'm extremely lucky to be able to be here to continue to do what I do, because, you know, if things went a different direction on that day, then I wouldn't be sitting here. But I always say something bigger than me kept me here.
You've got these experiences behind you, you've got the successes behind you, and you know, it didn't take away the challenge of managing your own mental health. So how do you manage it now?
How I deal with stress these days is 3 simple things that cost me no money at all. It's talking. So I call it sparring partners, like verbal sparring partners. Yeah. So I found a safe place with 5 great, fantastic friends in my life. That's talking. Writing is something that is such a great practice that it makes sense of my reality without needing other people around. So that's self-responsibility. And the third thing is prayer, so meditation or prayer. And that gets me out of myself. It always just lifts me above my situation.
For me, it's sitting in the bush.
Yeah?
Sitting in the bush, sitting around a fire. And it's when I'm out on country, it's when I'm out with the peace and the silence of what country can bring. And you're sitting and you're staring deep into a fire, hearing the crackling of the wood when those flames hit it, and feeling the warmth, being completely present in that moment. It's only when we start to slow down and begin to wind everything back and slow our mind down and sit with that presence, do we start to feel peace.
For me, walking for hours without headphones and just noticing nature, some people bizarrely find that boring. I find it intoxicating. And walking it's free.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Right.
Yeah. And but now that's where I write songs, because with the complexities of what's going on, particularly if you have a very active and vengeful imagination and mind, and those self-criticisms going over, to have something simple that you can access to, it's going to soften, and those snakes and lizards are going to start just getting on, maybe going to sleep for a bit.
So when we talk about managing our mental health, what comes to mind when we talk about the importance of early intervention?
If I think of myself as a car, early intervention would be to have check-ins before things break down.
That's always my experience as a therapist as well, is that quite often people wait until they really can't see the forest from the trees and things are so dark, and then they'll book in for a session. And really, it's almost like a crisis response in that space. You can hold space, and that's really important. And then if the fog lifts, men in particular will tend to disappear from my practice and then come back later.
Yeah.
Whereas the ones who hang around, really good therapeutic work takes place when you're kind of functioning. Like it's when the fog's lifting and you're willing to hang in there. I'm reflecting on everything we've discussed today. There's been a reoccurring theme of a lot of the intention when we talk about mental health is to manage it, not to fix it. And there's a pressure that comes with fixing, right? That can actually compound the symptoms you're experiencing as an individual. Every one of you's got your own strategies that you've shared as well, and I love how unique they are, but there's a commonality to them. You know, some of the common themes are, does it bring me presence? I know if I can get present, I'll be okay in the moment. And there's this beautiful acknowledgement that almost all of your strategies are personalised. They're things you can access reasonably quickly or reasonably easily, and they're almost exclusively free. And so whilst professional help's important, right, and we've discussed the importance of early intervention, the self-management day-to-day is actually not as complicated as we think. It's the commitment to small rituals that aren't overpriced, that work for you in the moment. You know, manage the moment, don't fix the problem. I think that's been a really strong theme. And I think conversations like this are so important for where we find ourselves as men in Australia at this point in time. There's a lot of challenges, there's a lot of questions being asked of us, you know, and I really think we've humbly answered some of that today. It's been a really honest, genuine conversation. The vulnerability's been palpable and inspiring. So I just want to thank three of you for taking part in it with a real strong sense of authenticity. It's been humbling to take part in.
Thanks, Tone.
Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, Joe, Matty.
As four men who have never met each other can come in and have a really deep and honest discussion about some pretty challenging topics is a real positive that I see that we can build on as men and model to other men in our communities.
I definitely feel less alone being from this conversation, and I just want to thank you, Tony, for creating a safe space for this. It's been great.